Welcome to the last of the Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 podcast, brought to you by Oklahoman Productions.
Drift off in my sleep and die. And so I began writing, I took the paper and the clipboard out of the trail registry, and I began drafting letters to my children, to my family, my mother and two sisters, and my friend Mark, and then also to whoever the unfortunate person was going to be that was going to find me. Right? This horrible idea that somebody at some point is going to find me there. And sort of accepted what was going to happen, and it probably merits saying that years ago, my friend Mark, one of the three that I've mentioned, he and I had pledged to each other that when our time came, and our time is going to come, so if there's anybody out there that's confused, I can assure you that the statistical probability of death remains constant at 100%. None of us, to quote Jim Morrison, nobody gets out of here alive.
Right. Hey, this is Scott Townsend. Welcome back to the last of the Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 podcast. And today, once again, I have with me fellow Wildcatter. They have been in the energy finance industry. They have joined the faculty at the OU Price College of Business. I knew I was going to stumble over that. And this person has two wonderful twin daughters, Meredith and Jessica. Welcome to the show, Ron Butch Bolen. How's it going?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on, Scott. I appreciate it.
So, as you know, we've had on, this is kind of a new project we've been doing. Yes. We've had Chris Zervis, Stacy Dennis, Donnie Moreland, Glenn Goodrich, Brett Thomason, and yes. Now you really appreciate your time, taking the time to visit with us and catch all of us Wildcatters up on what's been going on in the last 39 years.
Right. Well, I want to sort of begin by thanking you for having me on, and I think what you're doing is wonderful. I mentioned right before we came on air here that I'm not sure how many people around the country would even think about doing this. So what you're doing for us is incredible. The second thing I'd add is after I saw the Chris Zervis and Donnie Moreland interviews, I almost canceled on you because while I have suspected for a long time there might be vampires that walk amongst us, those two guys confirmed it because they're actually getting younger. I saw Chris in person a couple, 3 years ago, I guess, and it hurt. But then to see him on camera, it hurt just a little bit more. So no, it was intimidating to sort of see those folks.
And Donnie is such a great storyteller too. I need to have him back on because he's just hilarious.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I loved his conversation.
Yeah. So so we got the College High here, the last of the Col-Hi Wildcats. If we go back we'll go into several different paths here in the conversation. But if we were to go back in a time machine, just kind of I'll give you a lightning round of questions here. Why don't we do that? And I've not done this with anybody before, so I'm going to just rattle off some questions, and you answer as fast as you can, just top of mind.
You got it.
What car did you drive?
1974 3/4-ton Ford pickup until really my senior year, and I got a 1980 Ford Mustang hatchback.
Oh, cool.
The Gia model. I remember it was the Gia model, which I am certain they canceled quickly thereafter. But yes.
When you think of a band from high school, what band comes to mind?
It's a little bit interesting. I've heard this question before from you to others. Yeah, there was sort of that 38 Special Fog Hat sort of rock and roll Journey, Styx. Mm-hmm. I was sort of vacillating a bit between pop and jazz. So I sort of was a Huey Lewis and the News fan.
Yeah.
And then also I was listening to like Jean-Luc Ponty, so the jazz violinist. Sort of pretty eclectic, wide ranging, but that was, I tell my students now at the university that our generation made Duran Duran famous and we apologize. That's sort of, I don't think they're ever going to forgive us for that one.
No. If I mentioned a sport, what would it have been?
For me, or just in general in high school? Yeah, I was not particularly athletically inclined, to say the least, in high school. But for me, it would have been sort of this attending the football games, attending the basketball games. Ironically, so I know you've interviewed Glenn Goodrich. So during the summers, Glenn and I actually used to run together. We'd get up early in the morning and we'd run through this sort of basically a rural area behind his parents' home, and we'd sort of get a couple of miles and run in the morning. So I guess you could put that in there.
There is a picture of you in the yearbook playing racquetball.
I'll claim Donnie Moreland's excuse here, rattling around a 57-year-old brain. I forgot about that. That's right. So Mark Kelly and I played racquetball quite religiously. So we were on the courts probably 2 to 5 times a week. It's great sport. Loved it. Yeah. So, and of course, my brain's not triggering it.
Yeah, David Neer, Keith Clark, and others. We lived on the racquetball courts at the Y. It's such a great game.
Oh, such a great game. And there was a young man, I think he was maybe a year or two behind us, who was like competitive player. His father was a big player at the Y, and then tall,
I remember I remember exactly who you're talking about.
Amazing player.
Yep. And I can't think of his name either, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Friend.
Jim Webb, Mark Kelly. There were a couple of folks in there, Jason Casto and Todd Meyerdirk.
Yeah.
And, I was in that First Baptist group like you. So that included Rhonda Rizzo Webb, that included Lisa Hutchins, that included others that went through there. A great circle of friends.
Teacher.
Jim, I sort of always credit Jim for my only connection to the cool kids, right? So to say I was not in that circle would be an understatement of the decade, but I had friendship with Jim. And so from 7th grade forward, I might have been one of the dorks, but at least I had a friend that was cool, so I could hang out with him.
Yeah, Jim, the facilitator.
Absolutely.
Teacher.
Yeah, so a bit of a broken record, Sue Reynolds. Family living was extraordinarily impactful, but, someone who hasn't been mentioned, and again, I just want to digress for a moment, it's real easy to forget how grateful we should be about the education we received.
Right.
This is public education in a rural state in the U.S. We received a top-tier public education. I hope I have this name correct. Dan Simmons. He was our English literature professor.
Dan Simmons.
Mr. Simmons, if you could, grab your handy yearbook and see. Really drove in a passion for reading. He, first person that made me crack open Shakespeare. So really influenced me as far as reading. I sort of credit him with a lot of that. And of course, like everyone else, I think it was John Baird, sort of pushing through sort of whatever we called AP back then.
Yeah, so you were the drum major.
Yeah, that's unfortunate you should mention that. So can we cut that? Can we edit that? I claimed that I was running with a bad crowd and I just got caught up. Yeah, no, I was the drum major, the photograph of which, and if you show it, my lawyers
striking,
that we will call you within the hour. And so, but no, it's funny. That picture shows up quite a bit. I was drum major of the band. So
John Baird Society,
the Gene Dean Association, which was the science group. In all honesty, especially now, sort of my second career teaching at the university level, I can say unequivocally that we received a first-class education.
Yeah,
and it shows. In fact, I always ask my students, who's from Bartlesville, so we can talk about that.
There's a picture of the JDA toga party. What was that all about?
So I believe that was at Tim Brenner's home. If I may be wrong about that, but if I remember correctly, Jim Webb was president. I was vice president. I think John Lacey was secretary. A name you maybe not have thought of in a while. So John Lacey. Yeah. Being, trying desperately to be rebels, but also advanced chemistry. It's not really a combo you're going to find. So I think the wildest thing we could come up with was a toga party. I think Animal House had just been released, what, in 79, 80, something like that.
Oh,
and so,
yeah.
yeah, we had a toga party at this home. And I want to say Tim Brenner, I'm not sure that's correct, but yeah, it was just a fun party to sort of celebrate all the hard work that we were going through in that class.
Speaking of rebels, there's that one picture of you and there's a whole class and you and I think Jimmy and
John with the
sunglasses on.
Yeah. Yes, this is
trying hard to be rebels.
Yeah, exactly. This is the substitute for actual rebellion. Nerdy science students wearing sunglasses. Ooh, we were living out on the razor's edge with that one.
Yeah, thanks to the Wayfarers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Prom.
I'm gonna claim age if I miss the name. I believe it was Lisa Martin went our senior year, double dated with Tim Brenner and his date.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Lisa Martin and I went to prom senior year.
What did you think you wanted to be when you grew up? When you were in high school, when people ask you that stupid question, what did you say?
I would have said something in business. I didn't know. And it was, I know you've already touched on the subject with some others. Yeah, I was in I guess if I thought I was going to be anything, is I was going to desperately become an adult, whatever I thought that meant. And so I spent way too much energy and way too much time desperately trying to get to whatever adulthood was. Mm-hmm. And whether that had been a professional career, wearing a suit and tie and going to an office every day, or whether it was owning a business and running, I had no idea. I was just in this unhealthy urgency to become an adult, to grow up, if you will. So
right.
I don't know exactly, but it was probably going to be business if you ask me.
I think that's what we all kind of suffered through, was trying to grow up as fast as we could. And now we're trying to slow things down.
Yeah, I've given this an awful lot of thought over the years. The community of Bartlesville, which is so unique and just wonderful in so many ways, probably fostered that a bit more than maybe if we had been in a different community. I mean, I don't remember the stats. You certainly will know them better than I think you indicated 296 in our graduating class.
Mm-hmm. Something like that, yeah. Give or take.
On a percentage basis, the people that then left to attend a 4-year university or college or to do some sort of education post-high school was ridiculously high when compared to the rest of the population. Mm-hmm. The fact that, Phillips headquarters was there at the time,
right,
drove, I think, many of us to view that as sort of the apex, the epitome of what we were destined to do. So
2 more questions. TV
show, boy, that's a great one. I was a huge fan of Gilligan's Island. But of course, that was, if I remember correctly, that was during the period we sort of had, I think it was ABC that dominated the lineup. And I remember, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong with this, I think it was Friday nights, there was, The Love Boat and Fantasy Island, and then like Dynasty or something. There was a run there that sort of watched. I would say also that continuing along the nerd factor in high school, Monty Python's Flying Circus every Saturday night on PBS at 10 p.m. Had to get in off the cruising of the cars in time to watch Monty Python. So
yeah,
I'm sure my therapist will unbundle that for a decade. Any concerns?
All right, I've had so many people tell me to watch that show. Now so my wife.
Gotta get on it.
Check that out. Yeah.
Get on the Ted Lasso bandwagon, Scott.
Funniest memory of high school.
Funniest memory of high school. There were 2 probably. The car being put into the foyer, which a lot of people reference. Actually, there's one that's not as well known. Jim Webb and I had found that we could take our English credit for senior year between the summer of our junior and senior year in high school. So we could knock that credit out of the way. And if you'll recall, Jim worked at, I believe it was called Derryberry Jewelers every day after school. And I had an after school job. And our thought was, look, if we can knock down some of our credits, our senior year, certainly our second semester senior year, could be 3 to 4 classes tops. And then we'd have this additional time to either work or goof off or whatever we did. And so Jim and I we enrolled and we showed up on the first day of this senior English course at the high school. And I apologize, I don't remember the instructor's name, but she came over to Jim and I and said, "What are you two doing here?" And we're like, "Well, look, if we take this class now, we can eliminate it from our requirements our senior year." And she said, "This course is for the students who have failed English their senior year and are having to repeat." And we were like, "Yeah, good. Okay, we'll do it." And she looked at us and said, "Write one paper and get the hell out of the class. You'll pass." So we wrote a paper, and then Jim, this is really going down memory lane, Best Jet grocery store still exists.
Yeah.
And they had just received a new video game, Centipede.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Jim and I spent the time that we should have been in class studying English, learning how to play Centipede and feeding the machine quarters probably for the entire summer.
Shane's games, there was
oh my goodness. I remember there's a picture, I think, in the yearbook of George Davis. George is one of those, if I understand correctly, I think George ended up winning the Rhodes Scholarship.
Really?
I believe his PhD is from Oxford. Please don't quote me on that. Somebody please out there research this. I think George went on to run a couple of successful ventures in the NASA community in Alabama. But again, looking at these, and I think Brett did a wonderful job of explaining, the difficulty in choosing the valedictorian. We had, and I may have these numbers off, so again, please somebody correct me. I think we had 4 or 6 early graduates. Mm-hmm. Allison Holmes had graduated. Mm-hmm. Allison went on to get her PhD at Cambridge. She worked for the Parliament for a number of years. She's now a professor at Humboldt State in California. Mm-hmm. These are powerhouse brains that we had around us. And so I would say, looking at that, this was a pretty remarkable place to be getting your education.
Yeah.
Sorry, I digress here for a moment. George, I remember he would compete in Asteroids video game competition.
Oh man, Miss Pac-Man. Keith, I think, was like Miss Pac-Man King or something.
Yes. Well, I told my students are always asked, "Will you play video games?" I think the last video game I played was Defender, so I doubt I'm an expert on the topic.
So, all right, enough of the lightning round. So bring us up to speed. What's been going on with Butch Bolen in the last 39 years? What if you could give me a tour of, for a 35,000 foot view of your life in the last 39 years, what does that look like?
Maybe a bit more linear than some of the people you've talked to already. Stacy Dennis has had an amazing life. I'm a bit in awe of everybody, but so went to undergrad at the University of Oklahoma, got a degree in finance, and then immediately went to law school there. So I was actually in Norman for 7 years for education, practiced law for about 5 years, and then exclusively corporate and securities work, primarily mergers and acquisitions, and then went to NYU, New York University in Manhattan, to get my MBA. Married right after law school, Sharon Wentz, who was 2 years younger than us. She was a sophomore when we were senior. Our first date was my senior year, her sophomore year. We married the summer following law school, moved to New York. We had twins, so Jessica and Meredith, who are now 27, sort of did the prototypical MBA thing. So graduated with an MBA, went onto Wall Street as an investment banker, so serviced the energy industry, primarily hydrocarbon recovery, for several years as just a an investment banker, right? Getting people money that need money and merging companies, et cetera. Left there to go into corporate work. So I worked for a large international energy company. Really started traveling overseas. So at that point, the majority of my work was both in the former Soviet Union and South and Southeast Asia. So lived on an airplane for about a decade.
Oh, man.
In fact, I was telling Glenn Goodrich, actually, who we talked earlier, the shaved head. I began cutting my hair short during that period because 22 hours on an airplane, my hair would be standing up. So I started cutting it back and then ultimately decided to just shave the head in a remarkably failed attempt to hide the gray. But did that for a number of years and then joined a venture capital fund focused on energy technology. And so venture capital is investing in early stage companies. So back to about 27 startups. Had a great time. It was a wonderful, wonderful job doing that, and then got the bug to be an entrepreneur myself. And I will tell you, I teach that now. I tell my students, I must have been drinking or something because I thought, well, how hard is it to be an entrepreneur? I mean, I finance these people. I'm probably as smart as them. And so we, a business partner and I launched a very boutique international project finance company back in 2001. We grew it till 2004 and then sold it to a large private equity fund out of Chicago. And I stayed on and worked for that fund for about 4 more years. So in 2008, I basically retired. I didn't know what I was going to do. And my daughter, Jessica, had said to me, this is like being home from school when all your friends are still in class. Like, what are you going to do? Like, all your friends are still working. And so I began getting involved. So I went on the board of the MBA program at OU to try to give something back. I've been doing some guest lectures at the university, and I had enough other things that were kind of keeping me busy during the day to keep me out of the pool halls. And then was asked if I would consider going back to OU to teach. And the twins were just about to graduate from high school at that point. And so I said, well, I haven't really given any thought, but so thought about it and said, yes, I'll do this. In fact, we were all living in Houston at the time. Sharon and I had divorced. We're still great friends. I was on the phone with her 2 hours last night. She and her husband and I are all still very close. And but Sharon and I, we're all in Houston, and so it kind of timed out perfectly. I joke that the twins and I went to college on the same day. So Jessica went to the University of Texas for undergrad. Meredith went to Westminster College, where Jimmy Webb went. And I went to OU, or back to OU, on the same day.
Wow.
I didn't even sell my house in Houston. I kept the house because I thought, I'm going to do this for a couple of years. I just built this home, really loved it. And so I didn't sell the house. And then after 2 years, realized I had fallen in love with teaching. Perhaps one of the more rewarding things I've ever done. And
what is it about teaching that you like so much?
It just finished my 9th year. I'm sorry, say again?
What is it about teaching that you like so much?
I was, and I don't know how you felt about this at Oklahoma State. I was a frustrated student.
Oh, yeah.
Really at the undergraduate level, law school, business school is a little bit different. So by the time I hit my MBA, but I was frustrated because I felt that at least at the undergraduate level, my professors couldn't offer me anything. I would say, I'm not trying to be rude, but I was like, I can read a textbook. I can look at PowerPoint slides. What else do you have to give me?
Right.
And so when I was given the opportunity to go back and do a guest lecture or speak on a particular topic, I've been so fortunate that I've been able to intersperse stories, right? So I can tell a classroom. So for example, not to bore you or your poor audience that's watching this to death. So there's a thing called the
just us Wildcats, man. Just us.
Yeah,
Wildcats.
just the Wildcats. Well, so there's a thing in the federal law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act says if an American pays a bribe in the course of business, the American goes to prison. Right? It's a criminal act. It's federal criminal law, and so you can tell students, I used to teach an entrepreneurial law class, so I can explain the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we can read the act, we can look at some cases, but I think it's a lot more compelling for me to tell a story about being in Indonesia, negotiating a deal with the government who's expecting a bribe, and sort of having to work our way through that without succumbing. And I hope, I think it does. I think it resounds a bit more, and the students get it. And of course, then I just get completely energized. The idea that I get to spend my days around young minds who are eager to learn, and they still have energy, and they've not yet decided what they're going to do, and to be able to participate in some small way in that is just, it's unbelievable. It's one of the best jobs you could ever imagine. Plus you get summer. So.
Yeah. And it's almost like being in the entertainment business.
A bit, yeah, absolutely. It's funny when you mentioned, and I must admit, I didn't realize you were at Disney for a period of time, but I would say it's that, right? It's you're along with educating, you have to have some sort of performance in there to keep everyone's attention so they can get the content. And so I would love it sometime, and we can do it now or some point in the future. I'd love to hear about your experience there, because it must be fascinating.
Oh yeah, it was great. And that it's funny because they call their employees cast members. And when you go to work, you go on stage. So when you're on work, you're on stage. And so the whole terminology, the whole thought process around what everybody's doing is, if you're the janitor or if you're the CEO, you're all on stage trying to create this memorable experience for people. And so everybody's working together. When you go to get your uniform, it's called a costume. And, so and then when you go on stage, there are certain things you can and you can't do. So it was just a real immersion in, regardless of whether you're an intern, which I started out as, and then went to guest relations at Epcot. Even if you're on the phone with someone, they had mirrors in front of you to make sure you were smiling, because when you smile, your voice changes just a little bit, becomes a little bit more friendly. And so they've just thought of everything. And so it was really cool.
In academic speak, which I'm not an academic, but I've been around it enough now to get. So large organizations struggle with something called overarching goal, right? How do I communicate that everybody plays a role in the overall success of this goal, whatever that may be, increasing shareholder value, acquisitions, whatever it may be. And boy, that one sounds powerful. I love your description. So I've been fortunate enough in my career to manage a few teams in different areas. And my policy has been from then and even to today, if the lowest level employee doesn't feel comfortable talking to me, that's my fault. That's not their fault. That means I have set a stage that's incorrect, and they don't understand, or I've not communicated how important they are enough that they feel like they have standing to talk to me. In fact, I love what Disney has done there. I've had several friends at corporate Disney over the years, but I love the way they've driven it down. That's a fantastic story.
Yeah, it was a great learning experience. Probably one of the best learning experiences I've had since 1982. Stuff I've carried with me all through the.
Nice bounce back to topic, Scott Townsend. Way to feed it back in. This guy's a pro. Yes, no, that's absolutely correct. It is absolutely true. That there are lessons all of us took, whether they be explicit or subconscious, even from that time there, that I think have served us well through the years.
So let's get to what everybody is probably chomping at the bit for, wondering when is he going to ask the question. So here we go. We're in 30 some odd minutes into the interview, and I didn't want to make this all about the hike, which everyone knows about right now, but I'm going to start off about the hike, and then I'm going to throw it over to you.
As you wish.
So it was when was it? Tuesday, July, was it 16th?
13th. Yeah,
13th.
July 13th. Yeah.
And there was this post on Facebook on the last Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 page about that you had gone missing.
Yes.
So it was, wow. That's for me, that was shocking.
Yes.
And then news reports started coming out, and I found myself, I'm just telling you the truth here.
Please.
I found myself obsessed with this story.
Thank you.
And I found myself sitting at the computer, just waiting for the next update.
Thank you.
And it was, you've heard of stories like this, and they don't generally turn out well.
Correct.
And it was just, so then I started trying to put myself in your shoes. It's the third night.
Yes.
Now I'll let you get into all that, but I kept trying to think about what would I be doing, at this point? I would be, I don't know, I'd be freaked out. I mean, it's just, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't get myself to that place. And and Reddit community was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Thank you for listening to the last of the Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 podcast. And we'll be right back after this.
Pop's Daylight Donuts, man, they've got the best tasting donuts, sausage wraps, pastries in Northeast Oklahoma. And also, if you'll tell the staff there, hey, Scott Townsend said to give me a large spicy pig, they'll give you a free large spicy sausage wrap. But you have to tell them Scott Townsend sent you. So tell them, hey, Scott Townsend told me to tell you to give me a large spicy pig. So there's the offer. There's the call to action. So go to Pop's Daylight Donuts, say hi to Mark for me, and go to Pop's Daylight Donuts and get you some. The other sponsor is Cast-A-Fly Outdoor Adventures.
Adventure. That's where it begins. We look to create and document our moments in time while embracing the majestic wonder and beauty of the great outdoors. Our quest is to explore the back roads of the Ozarks, camping, fishing, and just getting lost. Refresh your spirit and join us on our next adventure.
Paul and his crew invite you to subscribe to the Cast-A-Fly Outdoor Adventures YouTube channel. The Reddit people got behind the search. Somebody said you should write if you know the governor of Nevada or whatever, send it. So I sent an email to the governor of Nevada, and I said, hey, I got a friend at this location, and I would really appreciate it if you bump this up if you'd run this up the flagpole and see about getting some help sent that way. I've never done that before. But there are so many people that were doing that, and on Facebook, same thing.
Yes.
And so Friday night, my wife and I were going to bed, and so I said, so let's say a prayer for Ron, and so we did, and then Saturday, the unbelievable, the news that you had been found alive,
Yes.
and of course at this point we didn't know what condition, whatever, but
Right.
just it was like, it usually doesn't turn out like this. And so it was just incredible, the relief that I know everybody felt, and so That was my experience. Now, I'm going to turn this thing over to you. Let's start with hiking. So how did you get into hiking, and why did you pick, was it Boundary
Peak?
Peak?
So there's first of all, if you'll indulge me, so
it's all yours.
Really beginning Saturday afternoon when I was released from the ER, and Jim Webb is there taking me to the ER in Nevada, I began saying, the work of my life from this point forward will be telling people thank you. It is still the thing I struggle with the most, is trying to get my head around everybody that got involved. And I don't mean just in this physical sense of, flying rescue helicopters or whatever it was. So many people have got involved. And to be honest with you, I bear a little bit of guilt. I feel responsible because on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, I was the only person that knew I was alive. I was the only person who knew I was mostly unhurt. And by that time, I had come to grips with the fact that people were looking, and there was probably this concern going on. I had no idea it was going to be this large. I had a dear friend tell me, this was it's a wonderful life moment. And certainly one of the things I intend to take away from this, that's not fair. I'm not going to put this on anybody else. I had no idea that the outpouring of love and support that was going to come my way existed. And it has been challenging to sort of wrap my head around. We joke about it all the time on Reddit, Chug Life 2000. Yeah. This guy won't even give us his name.
Yeah, I remember that.
Doesn't want any recognition. He had just gone to the mountain with two friends to try to find me. Those are amazing stories, how to get there around. And so to sort of back up to answer your original question. So I guess I would say, thank you for giving me the platform to tell others thank you. That has been my number one goal through all of this, is to tell people thank you and to tell them how grateful I am for everything that they did. But so how did this happen? Well, so years ago, I really enjoyed cycling, road cycling, sort of like Keith Clark, right? So
yeah.
Raced a bit in college and had done a number of sort of rides and races since college. And then had an accident and broke my wrist, and so began running as an alternative. And then that sort of turned into marathons. So I did about 12 marathons, ran the last 3 with my daughter Meredith. And Meredith,
cool,
that you may remember, is the one that really spearheaded the rescue efforts.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. I'll digress just for a moment. Jessica had just begun her residency in pediatric medical genetics and human genomics at Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston. And so she had very, very limited time. Meredith is a teacher. Meredith went to Westminster and then moved to Rwanda, Africa for 2 years and taught at a little boarding school there, and then came back and got her master's at Harvard, and then is teaching in Houston. But Meredith had the summer off. And in fact, I had spent the early part of the summer with her, but Meredith began assigning tasks to everyone around her to sort of assist in the rescue efforts. Mm-hmm. And so gave Jessica the task of running Reddit, because Jessica could do that between patients, with this demanding schedule of a new resident. And reading that has been amazing. So, but really Meredith's work, sort of leading the efforts, has been sort of life-changing for me. I mentioned the other day that, how many parents get the opportunity to say to their child, I owe you my life. And that's sort of a big deal. But so anyway, so running leads to triathlons, leads to sort of the lethargy that starts when you're working a lot of hours and spending a lot of time on airplanes. And so I had run again a little bit, but I was like, gosh, I'm aging out of running. I need to do something safer. So why not climbing and hiking? I've always enjoyed doing that sort of thing. In fact, Jim Webb and I worked at a sports camp following our senior year. So summer of 1982, Jim and I worked at a sports camp down in Texas, teaching rock climbing and rappelling. And so I began hiking and climbing, and have been doing that for the last 5-7 years, maybe. I guess really going a little bit further than that. But anyway, so that has sort of been my my outlet, one of my exercise, sort of certainly one of my passions, and then becoming a professor, moving into academics, freed up my summer. So it gave me a lot more time to participate in the activity. So why I chose Boundary is because it's the high point in Nevada. So there's this sort of little thing people do, which is, oh, I'm going to hit the high point in every state. So I'd done, Oklahoma, Texas, North Dakota, South Dakota. I'd already done New Mexico, although I repeated it right before the Boundary Peak.
That's cool.
The demanding Arkansas, Missouri, Jim Webb was with me for those. We joke about that because there's like a sidewalk up to the high point in the state. But these aren't really things that you're trying to accomplish. It's just a reason to get out and hike and climb.
Sure, yeah. The bucket list.
The bucket list, exactly. And so I'd gone to North Dakota and South Dakota with Meredith, brought her back, and then I began working my way west because I have some friends in California that we hike and climb together for a week each summer in the Eastern Sierras. And so we drove to Taos, New Mexico, and climbed Wheeler Peak, which is, I think, 13,040 feet just north of Taos, high point, New Mexico. Drove then to Flagstaff, Arizona, climbed Humphreys Peak, which is like 12,800. I don't keep up with the numbers exactly. And then moved over to Nevada, to Boundary Peak, to catch the high point there, go to the Sierras, and then come down and climb Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in California. Boundary Peak is a daunting hike. It's 13,160, I think, but it is 200 miles in circumference. It's a unbelievably rough terrain and very, very rarely traveled.
Really?
A good example might be this. So Wheeler Peak in New Mexico, which is very popular. If you've skied Taos, you've actually been right next to Wheeler Peak. Any given day during the summer, there's going to be 100 to 150 people hiking that mountain. And so you never lose sight of another human being. And in fact, once you break out above the tree line at about 10,000, 9,000, 10,000 feet, you just sort of see this stream of human beings. You can always sort of see them. But Boundary Peak, there were only 2 of us that summited that day, the 13th, and only 8 that attempted for the week. So this is a very rarely hiked summit. It's 4.5 hours north of Las Vegas. It's near the Death Valley. There's really not much infrastructure around there. But that's what put me up there. And sort of that was just part of this sort of longer trip this summer where I was high pointing a number of states.
And so then you took that selfie that we all the Wildcats know about. And so after the selfie,
what happened?
Take us back down the mountain.
Well, I have to say this. So several years ago, my daughters and I developed a safety protocol where I would always text at the start, text at the summit if I could, and then text back at the base, which really went a long way to alerting everyone what had happened. So it took me 7 hours to summit. So it was a 7-hour climb up to the peak. Signed the summit registry, right? This is a box, ammo box, and they have the little sign-in sheet there, and you get a little picture, So I took a selfie, which is not my style generally, but I sent it to the kids and said, "Hey, I've got cell service here. I summited," and then I began working my way back down, and there's a very long ridge line that leads to what I'm going to call the correct trail back down to my car. But there are 3 major outcroppings you have to sort of work your way around coming down that ridge line, and I stumbled at one of those outcroppings and I fell, and I say fell, I tumbled about 3 body lengths, 2 to 3 body lengths down the mountain. Wasn't injured. I twisted my ankle a little bit, but it wasn't. There was nothing wrong.
So what time did you summit?
Sorry, so I summited at 12:45 p.m.
So how long did you estimate it was going to take you to get back to the car?
A 5-hour descent. So it was 7 hours up, 5 down was my calculation.
Okay.
Turned out to be 7 hours up, 5 days down. Is really, really horrible. My math way off that day. Anyway,
right.
I will tell you, just because I know some people are interested in this. So at 12:15 p.m., 30 minutes before I summited, I was about 600 feet below the summit, and I ate a little protein cookie, and I actually texted my friend Mark McConnell, one of the rescuers that found me, and said, "Hey, I'm about 600 feet from the summit. I'm going to push up here in just a little bit, but I'm resting. I'm drinking some water. I'm going to eat this." So from 12:15 Tuesday until 11:30 Saturday, I ate 3/4 of one Cliff Bar, and that was all I
Oh my
had
gosh.
left in my pack. And so I was rationing that out through the days. But anyway, so I started the correct move that we now hopefully have all learned from me, even with my thick skull, it's gotten through. I should have climbed my way back up to the trail and continued along the ridge line to get to what's called the saddle, which leads to the scree field, which leads to the trail, back to the automobile. But I thought, well, look, I'm just going to angle down the face of the mountain. If I will intersect with that downward trail on a 45-degree angle, and that was wrong. I actually ended up down a wrong valley Tuesday afternoon. I knew I was in the wrong valley, but my calculation was, well, I can get to the end of the valley, get into the meadow, turn left, and I can still get to my vehicle at the trailhead. But that valley began to pinch off. I had run out of hydration at that point, so I was out of water, which I always carry extra. I had 3 liters with me for the day, but I'd run out of water. And so I thought, well, I'm going to hunker down. I'll sleep out under a tree. I'll get up Wednesday morning and I'll begin making my way back up the mountain where I can find the trail and get down. And nobody wants to do it, but I put on my rain gear. I was a little bit chilly, but I was under a tree. Wasn't worried. Didn't even, to be honest with you, wasn't even nervous. I had a little bit of battery left in my cell phone. I was kind of bummed out. I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the Sierras, but I wasn't concerned. Wednesday morning, I woke up quite early. I began climbing my way back up to 10,000 feet and traversed the face of the mountain all day looking for the trail, which I now know I could not see. There was a 12,000-foot ridge line that I actually had to be above to be able to find my way to the correct trail. But during that day, I found another valley that it looked like I could climb through and get down into this sort of open valley area, if you will. Began that descent, made it to about 8,500 feet, really about 8,000 feet, Wednesday afternoon. Could not make it. I was pretty zapped. Now I've gone another afternoon without hydration. I'm not feeling well. It was getting into the mid 90s, during the day, low 40s, mid 40s in the evening. So I just like I had done Tuesday night, I sort of found a high plateau to sleep on. I laid out all my gear in an attempt that if there's a helicopter that flew over, they would see my gear and maybe rescue me. But sort of went to sleep Wednesday night, thinking, well, the cavalry's not coming. This is up to you. You're going to have to get yourself down. And so I got up Thursday morning and I began exploring this plateau I was on, and I could hear water running, which was a great relief because it meant there's a stream somewhere. And I could see where I thought the streams were. Very, very heavy vegetation, but I basically gathered up my gear, put it in the backpack. I took my trekking poles off and I put them in a straight line, an angled line down the valley, trying to indicate if a helicopter flew over or somebody flew over, they would say, hey, look, go look down this valley. He's headed that way. And I began working my way down the valley and remarkably saw a helicopter, the first rescue helicopter. And that was quite a relief, but it was also a bit of a concern because there's only so many days that you're going to get air coverage for rescue. It just makes perfect sense, right? We can't, find every single hiker. We can't find anybody who's injured. They've got to find me. So I get stopped out. There's a point in that valley that I couldn't get past, but I still had hydration. So I began working my way, if you will, to the right. And I worked my way over to sort of this final valley on the right-hand side where I thought I had a shot of getting down into this sort of meadow. Slept there Thursday night, began hallucinating. I thought I could hear the gas generator for a trailer where I assumed there was a command and control center, overseeing the search. What I didn't know was that my daughter Meredith was in Houston, really leading the search effort. Mark McConnell, one of my dearest friends, one of the 3 guys along with Jimmy that found me, had already flown to Vegas. He was actually in Nevada on Thursday. Jimmy and another friend, the 3rd guy, Brad Schick, none of who, so Brad and Mark knew each other, but nobody knew Jimmy. They just dropped everything and got on airplanes and flew out. They're going to arrive Friday morning, but Thursday night I was beginning to hallucinate. So I slept as best I could, tried to regain my energy, and said, okay, I'm going to stay put for 2 days, because there's sort of this rule, stay put, stay alive, and they'll find you, right, when it comes to search and rescue. And so I'd made plans to stay put all day Friday and all day Saturday on the plateau. Unfortunately, and I'd had a very unsuccessful attempt to start a fire. I had a fire starter, a flint, but I couldn't get the tinder to ignite. And then I saw a fixed wing aircraft, an airplane, Friday morning about 9:30 in the morning, which gave me great concern, because where I had put myself was perfect for a helicopter, but there's no way an airplane was going to see me. The valley was too tight. And I'm sure, you know, single engine aircraft is very difficult to see out of anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, look, you know, you've got to kind of violate the rules. You got to move again. And so I began exploring the plateau, and I saw way out on the edge, about 3/4 of a mile down valley, I could see something that looked like a trail. So I made the decision to get to that trail. So I worked my way down, got on the trail, and began hiking down the trail Friday. Now, again, in my mind, I thought I would make my way to a meadow or a valley floor that I could then turn left and work my way back to the trailhead where my vehicle was. Walked that road for 2.5 hours. The trail entered a clearing, and then the clearing came to what's called a trail registry. This is a box that you open up, and there's paper in there, and you would sign, you know, 7/16/21, Scott Townsend. I'm going to hike for 4 hours into the wilderness. And that way it's a safety protocol, so that if you went missing, somebody would have a record of you being there. Also, by the trail registry, there was really easy access to the stream, which was within about 10 feet of the registry. But I walked past thinking, okay, I'm going to walk out. And I got onto this Forest Service road, began walking the road. The road pitched down. So after about 2.5 hours, I realized I was below the altitude where my vehicle was. I was not getting any closer. And now I got a problem, because the river is about 1/4 mile away. So I turned around and walked back, then walked back the road. I must have walked 200 yards on that road 3 times. And I realized that my brain was not functioning as it should. I wasn't able to make a decision. So I was like, okay, that's all right. You're going to walk back to the trail registry. You have access to water. That's where you're going to sit. With hydration, you've got a number of days. You've got this 1/4 of a Cliff Bar back left. You can, you know, eat on that. And
I mean, by this time you must be starving.
You know, oddly enough, no, I assume it's sort of like going on a multi-day fast. You just stop getting hungry. I actually didn't eat the last 24 hours. I was drinking water, but my theory was, if I got back to the trail registry, people come to the registry, I can stay put. I've got water. I'm fat. I can probably get a couple extra days out of my body fat, and it was going to be okay. Not going to be pleasant. Nobody's happy.
Yeah.
But I'll be found. I got back to the registry, and I was having real physical problems. I'd been in the heat for 5 hours, unshaded, mid-90s, depleted. I got back to the registry and I opened it, and the last person that had signed into that particular registry had been November of 2020. So it'd been 8 months since somebody had been in that spot. And to be honest, that was a pretty hard blow, because then I realized my only chance is a helicopter, and my hallucinations were pretty heavy. I tried to drink some water, but my dehydration level was such that it just, you know, you're not gonna make up for it. And so at that moment, and this is about 3:30 Friday afternoon, I felt it was very probable that when I passed out, because I felt like I was going to lose consciousness soon, that I would probably have a cardiac arrest and then just drift off in my sleep and die. And so I began writing. I took the paper and the clipboard out of the trail registry, and I began drafting letters to my children, to my family, my mother and 2 sisters, and my friend Mark, and then also to whoever the unfortunate person was going to be that was going to find me, right? This horrible idea that, somebody at some point is going to find me there, and sort of accepted what was going to happen. And it probably merits saying that years ago, my friend Mark, one of the three that I've mentioned, he and I had pledged to each other that when our time came, and our time is going to come. So if there's anybody out there that's confused, I can assure you that the statistical probability of death remains constant at 100%. None of us, to quote Jim Morrison, nobody gets out of here alive.
Right.
And so we know it's coming, and the question of when and how. And I'd pledged to Mark, and he essentially pledged to me that when our time came, we were going to go down laughing, not even smiling, because in the grand scheme of things, this amazing experience of life that we've had, and this is before this incident, my goodness, who could find fault? Yes, we've all had headaches. Yes, we've had trouble. I mean, this is not a smooth road, but the fact that we get to experience it, and I have been so fortunate, and my children are amazing. My relationships, everything. My life in the grand scheme of things is a joke, really. And so I knew that when my time came, that I was one of the fortunate ones. And I've sort of lived with this attitude of gratitude, if you will, not to be so Tony Robbins about it, but I find that the emotion of gratitude really makes it difficult to hold on to any negative emotions. So it's difficult to be angry. It's difficult to be resentful. It's difficult to be jealous if you have a sense of gratitude. And I don't know I know you're a big reader. If you haven't read any of Steven Pinker's books, I'd highly recommend. So the two that I think are the best are Better Angels of Our Nature and Enlightenment Now. Steven Pinker is a professor, I believe in sociology at Harvard, but he's really a statistician. And so especially the Enlightenment Now book lays out the statistical argument about why we should be happy. Like, if you think across the course of human existence, this is the greatest time in history to be alive. And the time in front of us will probably be the greatest, assuming we don't decide to end the grand experiment with a nuclear war or some sort of environmental disaster. Like, this is the greatest time to be alive, even though it's easy to say, my goodness, look at me.
You don't hear too many people say that.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment. I try to emphasize it to my students, but I will tell you that it has altered my life for about a decade. And I don't try to frame this in any sort of religious context. It's just this idea that, my goodness, well, I could perhaps best explain it this way. In my notes to my children, I said, look, how lucky was I? And again, this is in this mindset that I'm going to pass away. I got to die doing what I love to do, lying next to a babbling brook under the trees in the grass. Like, most people don't get that. An elongated battle with a terminal disease, an instantaneous loss of life through a car crash or something else. And here I am. I'm just going to slip away in my sleep. Yes, I'm saddened. I'm going to miss parts of their lives, but what a joy has it been to be with them so far, right? To see them through to their 27th year. And so I laid down and I anticipated that was going to be it. And I blacked out probably around 4:15. No way to know exactly. I was hallucinating auditorily. And with your indulgence, and I don't want, I hope people aren't clicking off or falling asleep as they watch this.
Oh, no.
I hope this is providing something for you, but
this is great.
I was unaware, obviously, of everything that Meredith had done, what Jessica had done, what others from our class had done, Jimmy especially. Jim jumped on an airplane and flew to Las Vegas and met a guy he'd never met before. They rented a Jeep and they started driving 4.5 hours into the desert.
Oh, wow.
Find me. And this is it's difficult to sort of, even today, learn everything that was done. There were dog rescue groups around the country that were ready to go. The Navy sent rescue helicopters. Actually, thank you so much. The governor of Nevada did get involved. His office,
Really?
the governor of California, the governor of Oklahoma, all three got involved.
Hmm.
The Nevada Department of Public Safety. There were people from our class that were reaching out and attempting to do whatever they could. We had a dog group called Ground Zero in Oklahoma that had made the decision that the bit side note here, the sheriff that was in charge of the rescue crew had failed to sign the release that would allow formal rescue teams onto the mountain. And a group in Oklahoma said, all right, we're just hikers. And they took off their uniforms and put on civilian clothes. And Sharon and some of the people that were around Meredith had found, sort of, again, I don't want to go too deep into this, but you don't just say, hey, I've got 8 dogs and 8 handlers, let's get them in the mountain, right? They have to have jets, and they have to have private jets, and they have to have transportation from the airport to the location. They've got to have food, they've got to have housing, they've got to do, to do what they do, they need all this assistance. And so Meredith and Brad Schick's wife, Jonna, and 2 professors, including David Kinzinger, who was, I don't know if you knew David when he lived in Bartlesville. He was an attorney at Phillips for years. He now teaches at the university. These people were in an inhuman way gathering up all these resources to help. And I'm unaware of it. And so Friday afternoon, Jimmy Webb and Brad Schick were scouring the mountain looking for a location that they could get as high up as they could in the Jeep, and then they would hike. So their plan was, we're gonna do some reconnaissance Friday afternoon. We'll begin our hike Saturday. We'll sleep on the mountain Saturday night if we haven't found him, and then we'll search on Sunday as well. Well, they ended up driving the Forest Service road that I had walked Friday afternoon. They came to the end of that road at approximately, and they've told me this, I obviously don't know it, but at about 6:30 p.m. Friday afternoon, I am passed out 250 yards away in the trees, and they can't see me. And I obviously don't know they're there.
Wow.
And so for about 10 minutes, they're there and they're like, well, we don't have our gear. It's getting late. Let's just go back. And so they drove back about an hour away.
And they were that close.
They were that close. They're about 250 yards away. I apologize. It takes a little bit of time here to tell the rest of the story. So Saturday morning, well, actually Friday night, they're in this little restaurant, this one restaurant in the town of Dyer, Nevada called Boonies. And they've got their maps out. Mark, Jim, and Brad do. And they're attempting to build a plan for Saturday and Sunday. What have we learned? Mark Mark is a world-class mountain climber, but had pushed his body to 11,000 feet twice. He had developed hypoxia, so altitude sickness, and he was still going. It was incredible what he was able to do, but they lay out their maps and they begin sort of figuring out a plan. And the young waitress, fatefully named Destiny, came over and said, hey, I heard the sheriff pinged your buddy's cell phone. Everybody in town knew what was going on. And they said, yeah, but we don't know where the ping took place. And so the waitress sort of leans over and says, well, look, there's only one cell phone tower and it's right here. And they pointed to a spot on the map. And so Jim went over and talked to her a bit more, and Mark and Brad were laying out a plan. And Jim came back and said, look, guys, can't tell you why, don't know why, but we must go back to that Forest Service road. And so they made the plan the Saturday morning. They drive back to the Forest Service road, and that's where they were going to begin their hike. And so bounce back now, it's Friday night. I wake up at about 8 o'clock, which surprised me, to say the least. And I began making notes for a plan. And the plan was I was going to walk the Forest Service road at night, sleep during the day, and I was either going to find a rescuer or I wasn't. That was really the only 2 options. And frankly, I became quite excited, because when you get, at least when I got to the point where I called it Plan Z, there's no other letter in the alphabet, right? This is going to be it. Right. Plan A, B, and C didn't work. Plan Z, this is all I got left. So I went to sleep Friday night, woke up Saturday morning, did what I did every morning, take off my rain gear, lay it in a clearing, sort of start making signals if I could to anybody flying over. And a helicopter flew over early Saturday morning and got very close. It was the closest helicopter in the entire 5-day ordeal that I felt truly had seen me. And so I got quite elated and thought, my goodness, I'm saved. And sadly, the helicopter banked away and flew. But I was like, that's okay. I've got my plan and I'm going to do it. And so about 9:15, I had put my backpack and this clipboard where I was taking all my notes. And I was taking notes such as, all right, I've got twisted left ankle, I got lacerations, I got some bruising, but I'm overall okay. Drew a map that said, hey, this is the route I'm taking. I was going to leave it there at the parking area of the Forest Service Road, the dead end of the Forest Service Road. Began planning to re-bandage my feet. I had my first aid kit and I knew my feet were pretty torn up, but I thought I could get those ready to go. And so the day, Saturday, was going to be spent hydrating, eating a little bit of nutrition, and preparing myself to walk out into Death Valley or somewhere near Death Valley, 6 o'clock that night. And then, like I said, the helicopter comes over. I'm quite down. I wrote that in my notes that I was quite depressed. But anyway, there was a hill, sort of up trail from this clearing I was in. And I climbed up. It was about 100 feet up. And I climbed up this hill. And my thought was I could get to the top of the hill and I could maybe see over the trees, see down the road, and know what I was facing Saturday night for this long hike. And at 9:45, I heard what I thought was a car beep, beep, beep. And I began hearing voices again. One of my hallucinations was voices. So I looked at my watch and thought, well, oh, crap. Okay, it's 9:45. Auditory hallucinations are back. All right, you've got to go write that on your notes. That's my notes were on a clipboard, which is sitting on the trail registry. This, if you will, this podium that opens up that you sign in on.
And this kind of gave you some sense of purpose, probably. Is this
absolutely correct? It was more important to keep my mind occupied than it was to write down. Now I thought, look, if I don't survive and the Forest Service can use these notes to help in the future, great. I think I said to them, it'll be a small contribution, but yeah, it was mostly to keep my mind occupied because for me, even though I have sort of this positive attitude, I couldn't help think, all right, I think I understand biologically what's happening. I think I know the math. Mm-hmm. By this time, nobody, now there were people that were eternally hopeful, but if you knew the situation, you weren't running to Vegas to lay a bet on me being found. So anyway, I start climbing down this hill to get to the trail registry so I can put my note down that my hallucinations were back. But they weren't hallucinations. It was Jimmy, Mark, and Brad. They had locked their cars and they had grabbed their backpacks and they were walking through the trees towards the trail registry. Mark and Jim and Brad. Jim gets to the trail registry first. Mark and Brad show up. They see the backpack. And Mark knew that I carried a particular brand of gear. But that's like saying Scott Townsend wears polo. Like, it's just sort of like a thing. Okay, it's a Black Diamond, a scent bag. Butch carries a scent. Brad reaches down, he finds his clipboard where I have written a note and had drawn a map of, hey, here's how I'm going to try to walk out of here beginning 6 o'clock tonight. And then they saw my car keys, or they saw keys to a Toyota. I should be better about that. And that really knocked the wind out of them. And then when they saw my name on the credit cards, Brad, Mark, and Jim had sort of accepted the fact that things had gone the wrong way. I had died somewhere on the mountains. Another hiker had found my backpack and had put it here on the registry. It just so turns out I had made it to the bottom of the hill. I had begun walking through the clearing to get to the registry. And Jimmy was the first one to see me. He screamed out. Mark looked up and thought I was simply the guy that had found Butch's backpack. They didn't expect to see me. And then Jim realized who I was. And the three of them began running up trail towards me into this clearing. So we're about 75 yards apart, screaming. I get a couple of steps forward and I hit my knees. I just am bawling. And they tackle me, as you can imagine. Everybody's crying, everybody's laughing. Nobody had predicted this ending. And so I honestly thought I was hallucinating. I kept pushing on Brad's leg, asking if he was real, because I couldn't get my mind convinced that what was really happening was not a hallucination. I told them that, I've been out here for a while. I think I may be in a dream. I didn't yet understand what was happening. And they were able to convince me that no, in fact, it was not a dream. And we gathered up my gear, and of course we were just, everybody's crying, everybody's hugging. It's an ending that nobody thought was going to happen. And we get back to the Jeep and the truck that they had rented, and we began driving down the mountain, and about 1.5 miles down mountain, ran into the Nye County Search and Rescue Squad. You may have seen that photograph with the gentleman, kind of got into the press pretty quickly, but I'm standing there with that search and rescue crew. They had a medic who did quick look at me and say, okay, look, I think you can make it to the hospital. Brad and Mark and I have to mention this, and just if you'll bear with me, Sharon, the twins' mom, my ex-wife, Sharon Winston, everybody knows. Her husband flew from San Antonio to Vegas and had driven up into the desert to assist in the search and rescue. He actually gave me a hard time and said, why didn't you hide for 2 more hours till I could make it to the actual rescue moment? But I was so touched. And again, this is sort of where I am now emotionally with all of this. How do you find the words to tell people thank you? How do you express gratitude when something like that happens? But anyway, so Brad, Mark, and Barry went to go get my truck because it was still at the trailhead about 1 hour away. Jimmy got the dubious honor of driving me to the hospital, which was about 1.5 hours away in California. This is, like I said, the very remote area.
Being a doctor, that probably makes sense.
Well, and it turned into a bit of a funny moment. Jim, the rescue crew had alerted the hospital that I was coming, so they had a crash team there, and Jim had called and said, look, I'm bringing him in. He looks okay, mostly. We get to the ER, we get in, the team grabs me, and they begin, putting IVs in me, running tests, and Jimmy goes up to the head ER guy and says, look, I don't want to interfere, but looks like the majority of the damage is to his feet. I'm a podiatrist. If you would like me to, I will take care of that part. And the ER doc just instantaneously said, yeah, get after it. And so I'm laying on this table in the ER in Bishop, California, in the Inyo Regional Hospital emergency room. And our class president is performing surgery on my feet, or procedures. I don't think you would appreciate it, calling it surgery.
Yeah.
But I had some open wounds, blisters, lost some toenails, that sort of thing. But Jim took care of me. And along with being one of my dearest friends, right? How do you account for, him being there? So I told the head doc on site that, look, I travel with my own podiatrist because I know these sorts of things can happen. So anyway, I was in the hospital for about 5-6 hours. All the tests came back negative. There were a couple they couldn't run that I had to do in Oklahoma, but I was mostly in good health, right? And so it brought me back to this little town of Dyer, Nevada. And then Sunday, my daughter Meredith flew up from Houston, and she and I drove back, and everybody got flights and flew back. And here we are a couple of weeks later, and it's I'm still sort of in awe of what everybody did and what people were willing to do to save me. And I think, like I said, I've had 3 lifetimes. I couldn't tell everybody thank you enough. It's a remarkable outcome that certainly wasn't predicted.
It was a remarkable and is a remarkable outcome.
Well, I hope we haven't lost any of your viewers. That dragged on a bit. I apologize, but I don't know how to tell a short version of it. I mean, the short version is I survived for 5 days, long enough for people to find me. It doesn't seem to do it justice.
I'll just edit down to that part right there.
Yeah, exactly. Just cut it all out. Like you could even subtitle this particular episode "Fat Boy Survive," something like that would probably be as close as you could to incorporate it. But yeah, no, it was.
No, I think the Wildcats, any Wildcat listening, watching, all want to know. And, everyone, I was very grateful that you were willing to spend the time to talk about it. I thought, personally, this might be too early, too soon, whatever, just whatever he wants to do, I'll do it, and if he doesn't want to do it, cool. No harm, no foul.
I was thrilled. Almost selfishly, this is yet another platform where I can tell people thank you, especially people from our high school and specifically our graduating class.
Yeah.
I was hearing from people that I hadn't heard from in quite some time, right?
Well, you and I haven't spoken in 39 years,
Exactly. And so how wonderful is this? How beautiful is it that it brings us together? I think Glenn said even in his interview, this technology that we're faced with has allowed us to reconnect with people that we had lost connections. And if this incident has reconnected me with people, great. I had seen Chris a couple of times over the years. I'd seen Brett several times, but Stacy Dennis, Donnie Moreland, what a joy it is for me, and how grateful I am to get the chance to reconnect.
Yeah, well, that's great. And when you're in Bartlesville, or if I'm in Norman, whatever, we should go drink some coffee or something.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm in Bartlesville actually quite a bit. I try to get up to see Jim. My parents are no longer there, but and my father passed away, and my mother lives here in Oklahoma City near me. And we, but because of Jimmy and other friends, I go up as often as I can. And in fact, one of the other rescuers, Brad Schick, I drug him to Bartlesville so he and Jim and I could have a celebratory dinner at Murphy's.
Yeah,
had never had a hot hamburger, and although his cardiologist is now very upset with him, he really enjoyed it. And so I'm actually up there quite a bit. I still have friends there, and I try to come. And I'd even joked with Jim last year, but of course it's taken a much more urgent thought now that look, when I retire, I may move back to Bartlesville. It's a wonderful community, and love the people that are there, and knowing how many people now are either living there or working there from our classes is even better.
Well, it's a great story. It's an impactful story, and it got a good ending, which is wonderful. And so glad that one part of the story that really strikes me is the point where you were writing, and you were, and then you said you passed out and then woke back up.
Yes.
And you probably thought, I don't know, tell me, it seems like what I heard you say was when you woke up, it was like, well, dang, I thought I was going to die and I didn't. So, okay, here we go. Plan Z, Exactly.
Yeah. I don't understand how the mind works, but I would say that it was interesting. I actually had to go back to the notes, the letters I'd written my children, and I did sort of so I made it to 8:00 Friday night, right? Sort of at the bottom of the note. They've not yet read those letters. They're not ready. I don't know how long it'll take them till they are ready, but yeah, but then immediately my brain just said, all right, great. You're here. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do to solve this problem? And that's when I began devising this idea that I was going to walk out and I felt decent probability I could survive it. I knew I probably would have access to water. I felt like, look, if I get into the valley floor, maybe I can make it to a highway and somebody can find me in this room.
Yeah. Last question.
Sure.
And I ask everybody the same question. This is almost like a sociological experiment. 40 years later, what would you tell, your younger self as Butch is coming off the graduating platform. And I was thinking last night, there's no such thing as a time machine, but actually we do have the chance to do this with our own children.
Correct.
So, whether it's you going back to, your former self, or if it's going to your children and saying, look, bottom line, this is what I want you to know. What's that going to be?
Well, I'll even add to it, I'm extraordinarily fortunate doing what I do now for a living, higher education. I get to talk to students every day, hundreds of them, about just this topic. And I would say this: it's okay to be different. I tell my daughters and tell my students, and I burned so much energy and so much time in high school desperately wanting to be like everybody else. With all due respect to Chris Service, who I learned through this show was anxious about high school. I lived my entire junior high and high school life completely intimidated by everybody. I thought everybody else knew how the world worked but me. I thought everybody was smarter than me. I thought everybody was certainly wealthier than me. I thought certainly everybody was cooler than me. Everybody knew how the world worked but me. I was so intimidated by that. And I was like, okay, all you have to do is fit in. If you can just be like everybody else, this is how you can make it. And maybe that was our drive to become adults. We thought, well, look, when I look at adults, they're sort of homogeneous, right? They all kind of look and act the same. And if we could just get there, life will be great. And don't, be different. Understand, if you can, what gifts you have. What cards fell your way in the roll of the genetic dice. What did you have from this amazing education we received? And now go do that. Quit attempting to be like everyone else, especially now knowing that, someone is sorry. I feel like Chris is going to send me quite a mean text. I don't blame him. Seeing somebody like Chris Service, who I sort of epitomized and thought, well, this is a guy who's athlete. He's popular. He gets along with everybody. I mean, everybody loved Chris Service in high school.
Right.
Like, to hear as an adult Chris say something like, oh, I was just completely anxious. I just felt, for me, it was just a confirmation of this idea that none of us knew what was going on. With the exception of Jim Webb. Maybe Jim knew and nobody else did. We'll give him that benefit of the doubt.
Maybe we'll ask him sometime.
Ask him something. Well, I hope you don't mind.
No.
He got quite a stern text message from me last night saying, you're going to do this show. I don't care. There will be no excuses. If I have to come and drag you to Scott's home, you're going to do this show. So he's going to do it.
Good.
Just be yourself. It's okay. I guess a subtext to that would be, don't rush to become an adult. There was no need.
Yeah. That's great, Butch. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing your story and for all the lessons that that story teaches us. And
well, thank you for doing this, Scott. This is, like I said, I've watched the Scott Townsend Show, right? So, and then your willingness to do this, I think, is going to be amazing for us.
We should put it in a time capsule and.
Of course, right? Well, we have, right? We call it the cloud now, but we have a time capsule, and we'll be able to draw this down, and our children and maybe even our grandchildren will be able to watch. Oh, look, there's our grandfather Scott talking about these things, and what an amazing gift you've given us. And so, on behalf of myself and everybody else in the class, thank you for doing this. This is a remarkable gift you've given us, and I know many others will be thrilled to participate with you.
Well, I can't take all the credit. We'll have to, Stacy Dennis is part to blame for this. It was her idea to begin with,
What an amazing person Stacy is. I loved her interview, and I love the fact that she's encouraged you to do this, because that sounds like Stacy to me.
You're right. All right, Butch. Well, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for joining us. For more information, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they go?
The best place is quite simple. It's Ron. Sorry, that's how I'm known in professional circles. ron.bolen@ou.edu. It's about as simple as it gets.
Okay.
And I would love to hear from others, and certainly have begun that process and reaching back out to everybody that, because of the recent incident, that have sort of come back into my sphere. I love it. I'm having a great time.
Great. Well, here we are for Ron Bolen. This is Scott Townsend. Thanks for joining the Last of the Wildcats 1982 podcast. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
The Last of the Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 podcast is a Oklahoman production. For more episodes, visit the Last of the Col-Hi Wildcats 1982 YouTube channel, listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.